Good afternoon, I'm Tracy Sinclair, and welcome to this edition of In Depth Alaska. Now, last Thursday was the day that most of Alaska started to get more darkness than daylight for the season. And some of us are going to start to feel the effects of that. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to bring in somebody who knows a fair bit about this, Dr. Chris Jung. He's a professor of anatomy and physiology over at the University of Alaska Anchorage. And I really appreciate you stepping in with us, Chris, and talking a little bit about this. Can you kind of give me an idea of what, we use the term SAD, Seasonal Affective Disorder. Can you kind of give me an idea of what that is?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is kind of the withdrawal, depressive symptoms, lethargic energy that we get when there's a change in the seasons and kind of persists throughout the winter. And we might not notice it right away as we lose light, but I personally myself find that I really get a little more energy in the springtime, and then I realize, oh, I probably had seasonal affective disorder. It's because it comes on so slowly.
And why does this happen? What happens within our bodies that suddenly we're like, oh, I'll go take a nap instead of, doing the housework that I kind of need to do. What's happening in our bodies to cause that?
Well, there's several hypotheses, and when we talk about a behavior, there could be many things neurologically affecting that. One could be the serotonin, a neurotransmitter in your brain that helps with depression. So it could be that. It could be also a vitamin D deficiency. Or it also could be that your internal clock is not totally aligned with the clock of Alaska, so to speak. And so any one of those has been hypothesized to influence seasonal affective disorder.
And it kind of feels like there are some people I know that this really impacts them. And I personally don't feel like it bothers me that much. I mean, it may be one of those things where you're like at the end of the year go, oh yeah, maybe I was a little depressed. But does it affect more people differently? And is there any indication of who might be affected by this or more impacted, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as you go higher in the latitude, so further north in the northern hemisphere, there seems to be more and more prevalence. One study even showed that 1.4% of Floridians have it. As you get up further north, there was a study that was conducted in Fairbanks, and they found that women are more likely to get it than men. Also, people under 40 are more likely to get it. And then, additionally, people that are night owls, it's called delayed sleep phase syndrome. So people that want to stay up a little later every night, but then kind of are sluggish in the morning, they tend to be more likely to have it, actually 3 times more likely to have it than normal sleepers or morning larks.
So those of us that are, get up, get it done first thing in the morning, probably less likely to have it or to feel the impacts of it as much.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that's in part because of our circadian system. Those that are wanting to go to bed a little later have a little bit longer of a circadian clock. And so they might be living on a 24-hour and 20-minute day, even though the Earth is a 24-hour day. So they just want to stay up a little bit later. But then in the morning, they're not getting the light that they need to help synchronize their circadian clock to the light-dark cycle of the planet. And that's the primary cue or synchronizer is light. And it's most sensitive. The circadian system is most sensitive in the evening and in the mornings.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that because you and I have discussed this a little bit. One of the treatments is, I've seen several people here at the office, they have those SAD lights and they'll sit next to them all day. I'm like, I don't know how you can sit with that bright light right next to you. Is that the way? I mean, how do you treat something like this? How do you take care of it if you are a person that starts to feel the impacts of this? What are the treatments for it? Are those lights effective?
Mixed results, but there are some studies out there that say that they are effective, especially the ones that are pretty bright, and the ones that you kind of need to do it for weeks at a time. Just a day here or there won't really help. And so what happens is with those delayed sleepers or night owls, um, because they want to stay up a little bit later, their circadian clock actually, they're kind of giving themselves jet lag, even though they're not traveling. So they actually have to advance their circadian system a little bit every day to offset that longer circadian duration. So to do that, they would want to get light in the mornings, and that will advance that circadian system so that they're more in tune with the light dark cycle of the planet. Um, that being said, is when we're starting to wake up now and it's still dark out, they're losing that synchronization. So that's where that light box comes in, is to kind of mimic the natural light that they should be getting, but they are not. So that should advance the circadian system. Additionally, might get a little bit of vitamin D out of that from what I've read, some couple studies, and that can help with that seasonal affective disorder as well.
Yeah, because I know you're right that even, like I said, I don't really feel like I get affected by it that much, but it is really lovely some mornings when you get up and there's bright sunshine. And so, are there, the lights in your house probably not as effective? You want something that mimics daylight and has those certain rays that come through.
Exactly. Yeah. And additionally, you want to stare kind of right into it. You don't want it just off to the peripheral vision. You want it to be right in your face, very bright. And, you can maybe eat breakfast, drink your coffee, um, uh, read right by it. But it is supposed to help a bit. Yeah.
And so, when do we get to the point where we think, okay, this isn't enough? I need professional help. At what point do we say, I don't think a little bit of the light is working? That I am really quite depressed.
Yeah, so if you are feeling fairly lethargic and depressed, and if, then I would definitely go see your physician. And you can get on antidepressants as well. That is supposed to help for sure. That's probably when you really want to start looking into that. And right now, the symptoms are slowly coming on, since we're losing about a little over 5.5 minutes a day. And also, some of us might be waking up in the dark rather than in the light.
Yeah, this is that point of the year when I do start to notice, because you'd wake up and my bedroom was light and I didn't have to worry about turning on a light, and now that's no longer happening. As a person, your specialty is sleep. How does this affect a person's sleep? I know we talked a little bit about just those night owls staying up. Any other things that, from a sleep standpoint, that can either help or we'll see an impact of?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're a night owl and you want to sleep a little bit, go to sleep a little bit later and stay asleep a little bit later in the morning. However, you have to wake up for work or class. Your boss might not be okay with you sleeping in. Then you might end up losing sleep because you're going to go to bed a little bit later and have to be awake at the same time, and you're not getting that natural light in the mornings to resynchronize your system. So that can impact sleep. However, I have found that doing research here in Anchorage, that when people sleep in their natural environment, or they're at home, they tend to sleep a little bit longer on the weekends to catch up. from during the week. And we actually sleep on average about 50 more minutes during the winter solstice when compared to the spring equinox. And when you look at the spring equinox, that's when that sunlight is coming up before a lot of them are waking up. And so that really does have an impact on setting their internal clock to the light dark cycle of the planet.
And I find it fascinating because, you do always hear people say, oh, I'm a night owl, I'm a morning person. It sounds like those are real things. Is it a real thing? And if you are one, can you change to the other? How do you get to be that way, I guess?
Yeah, so it's kind of a continuum. It's genetics. And what's happening is if you are a morning lark, you're living on a shorter than 20, your internal clock is less than 24 hours. So you want your day is shorter than the light dark cycle of the planet. So you'll want to go to sleep earlier, but then you'll also want to wake up earlier. If you were on a perfect 24-hour internal clock, you would end up being perfectly in sync with the planet, and you wouldn't have to delay or advance your circadian system at all. So then on the other end of that continuum, if you're on a longer than 24-hour rhythm, you're wanting to go to bed later, stay asleep later, and you're living on a little longer than 24-hour rhythm. So that can have important influences, and that is all come down to genetics. And therefore, you can't really change all that much, but you can manipulate the system by when you're getting light. So if you're a morning person, you'd want to get bright light more in the evening. And if you're a night owl, you want to get bright light in the morning. So that'll shift that circadian system a little bit more. Essentially, you're trying to combat jet lag, even though you've never traveled. You're trying to just combat that jet lag and synchronize your internal clock with the external clock. Additionally, when you get older, you tend to have become more of a morning person, and you want to go to bed later and later, or earlier and earlier. And I think that's why people that are under 40 are more subjected to seasonal affective disorder.
Well, I am fascinated by that because it never occurred to me that a person's body clock could be longer or shorter than the actual 24-hour day. But the way you say that and kind of reference it to jet lag makes a lot of sense, because that is kind of what it feels like, and a way to treat jet lag. So very fascinating. And so just talking to most of Alaska, a lot of us will feel the effects of this darkness. Dr. Chris Jung from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad you could spend a little time with us today.
Thank you, Tracy. Have a good afternoon.
You too. And thank you all for joining us here on In Depth Alaska. Of course, you will always find more on our website at alaskasnewssource.com, and join us on Alaska's News Source at 4, 5, 6, and 10, and like and subscribe to this podcast.